Welcome to this episode of Q&A with Liturgy Man. I'm Taylor Burton-Edwards, Liturgy Man, your Director of Worship Resources with Discipleship Ministries of the United Methodist Church. I am your apportionment dollars at work to help you strengthen worship and the understanding of worship where you are. Today's question comes to us from Kimberly Phillips, who wonders why there seems to be such a difficulty in helping churches understand the distinction between celebrating the Christian year as the basis of everything we do and celebrating secular holidays as part of our standard Sunday morning worship as well. I'd like to go back to the 1905 hymnal and give you a sense of what worship was like in 1905 and what our life and really all of our history had been roughly up until that time. If you take a look at the table of contents of the hymnal and you take a look at the hymns themselves, one of the things that you will find is that the Christian year really doesn't exist. There are a few special days in the Christian year that are important: Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, but the Christian year as such isn't even present. We start to see a little more attention being paid to the Christian year as an organizing principle for worship in the 1935 and 39 Methodist hymnal that was produced jointly by the Methodist Episcopal Church, Methodist Episcopal Church South, and the Methodist Protestant Church, and then became the Methodist hymnal at the Union in 1939. There's a little more attention here to this, but if you think about how much there is, and you ask yourself how many Advent hymns are there, for example, in the whole section of the early part of the life of Christ, it's a grand total of 3. There was some remedy that was proposed for this, and giving some additional resources for the church year in the 1945 Book of Worship, as it was approved in 1944 at General Conference. This provides a variety of resources, full worship orders for different seasons of the Christian year, plus a variety of worship aids, calls to worship, prayers, confessions of sin, a whole variety of things. It's actually a very comprehensive collection. But then if you take a look at how it organizes the Christian year, you will find interspersed within those things listed as for the Christian year also program Sundays like Race Relations Sundays and Mission Sunday, and the secular holidays like Independence Day and Memorial Day, and I think it was still called Armistice Day in this book. The 1964-66 hymnal that then became the hymnal of the United Methodist Church, one of the 2 hymnals of the United Methodist Church. This was published as the Hymnbook after the Union of 68. This one did include a few more resources for Advent. In fact, it's the first hymnal we ever produced that actually has a whole section of resources for the Christian year. And so there are hymns that are organized according to the Christian year to be used during the Christian year. At the same time, if you look at the Book of Worship that was developed to accompany this volume, you'll still see the same pattern we saw in the 45 Book of Worship, that those secular holidays and those programmatic days were mixed right in with the resources for the Christian year, leaving the impression, and really it was the intention to say, on those days, don't think about season so much, think about the special theme of that day and follow that. It is not until the 1992 Book of Worship that we made a clear set of priorities around worship, that the season of the year and the scriptures for the day based on the lectionary were to provide the solid basis for what we do in worship in the United Methodist Church. And that if you're going to pay attention to the secular holidays or the program Sundays even, you would do that within the context of the seasons of the year and the scriptures of the day first, rather than theming the day around that programmatic or secular holiday emphasis. 1992. So think about it. Perhaps one of the reasons that there is still this tension that exists in a number of places is that this practice of really building our worship around the church year and around the scriptures from the lectionary is a relatively new one for us. If you think about when many of our pastors grew up and what they grew up with, I would imagine an awful lot of our older pastors particularly grew up with the 35-39 hymnal and the 1944 Book of Worship. Many of our more middle-aged pastors grew up with the 1965 Book of Worship and the 1964 and 66 hymnal, as well as the EUB hymnal that did some similar things as the Methodists did around this issue. And that it's only really our younger pastors who grew up knowing only this way to organize. And likewise, if you look at our congregations, it's probably only those who are younger among us who have that as their solid basis for organizing how worship is put together on those days. Hope this has been helpful. Remember, you can always contact me, worship@umcdiscipleship.org, on the UMC Worship Facebook group, or just drop a line on this page. And perhaps your question or comment will become the basis of a future episode of Q&A with Liturgy Man. And the peace of Christ be always with you.